I was searching for a decently fast zoom lens that really wouldn't break the bank to pair with the Viltrox Speedbooster, and I actually ended up settling on the sub $400 Sigma 17-50 f2.8, and there were a few reasons why. Now, there were lots of different things that led me to the Sigma 17-50, but first off was the focal range. The focal range was a piece that I was pretty attracted to just because having that 24mm equivalent has been a really nice addition to my videos, because typically I shoot at my 25 f1.7, which ends up being like a 50mm. Now, the compression on that's nice, but being able to reach right out and change my focus is really helpful. And also I've had a lot more options when it comes to composition. Like I wouldn't be able to get this shot that I'm getting right now if I didn't have a wider angle lens. So it really fit the bill for that really well. And along with the wide end, it also gets to equivalent of about 71mm with my Speedbooster, which actually has some really nice compression, even though it's only f2.8 versus like a 1.8 you would get with like a Canon 50 1.8 or my Yongnuo 50 1.8 as well. With the Speedbooster, the Sigma 17-50's equivalent focal length on a full frame camera would be a 24-71, which is kind of like the staple zoom lens in the filmmaking world, if you will. And this lens has really turned into my like everything lens. So if I want really nice wide shots, or if I really want nice compressed, beautiful bokeh filled shots, this lens is definitely great for that. Another reason was the constant aperture. Now, constant aperture basically means that when you zoom in and out on something like a kit lens, either if you have a Canon or a Panasonic, what ends up happening is that at the wide end, let's say you take the Canon 18-55 or whatever, at 18mm, it's f3.5. And then when you go into the 55mm zoom, you're actually gonna go down to 4.5. Now for stills, that's not necessarily a big issue if you're not worried about depth of field, but if you're zooming in mid-video, what'll end up happening is that when you zoom in with a variable aperture, the exposure will actually change because the amount of light that it's letting in will actually get smaller and smaller as you zoom, which is a bit of a problem for me. Now, along with that really nice depth of field that this aperture gives you, attach a speed booster to that, and it ends up turning the equivalent aperture to f2.0 through the entire focal range. And that's just a really nice addition if you're using a speed booster. Now, in contrast, this Sigma 17-50 has a constant aperture of f2.8. That means at 17mm, it's gonna be at f2.8. And when it's at 50mm, it's gonna be at f2.8. So that constant aperture through the entire zoom range is super nice. And the f2.8 is really nice for bokeh. This shot is technically at 21mm on a lens, which translates to like 35-ish, and you can still get a decent little bokeh lights in the background. So even at wider angles, you can still get some really nice depth of field. For like $100 cheaper, there was pretty much an identical iteration of this lens, the 17-50, that was an f2.8 at the wide end, and then at the 50mm, it ended up going down to f4. That's definitely usable if that's what you're gonna be getting, but that's definitely something to look out for if you're considering getting this lens. Just make sure you're getting the f2.8 constant aperture version versus the 2.8 to f4 variable aperture version. Third reason is price. Now, I just want you to think for a second, where can you get an f2.8 constant aperture 24-70 equivalent with like any brand out there? Maybe I'm missing something, but this, for just shy of $400, this just seems like a ridiculously good deal for what it is. Now, everyone's gonna say that the 18-35 is so much better, and I'm sure that it absolutely is, but really for my needs, $400 for a 24-70 f2.0 equivalent lens is just a really awesome option. And at this point in my filmmaking career, $800, even though in the grand scheme of things isn't that much money, I just still can't justify that expense right now. Now, this fourth one has actually been pleasantly surprising to me. And if I was shooting everything on my G85, I wouldn't really care about this part. But because I'm gonna be shooting a lot of things on my GH4, especially the 60p, not having stabilization in that camera can be a little bit annoying at longer focal distances. The Sigma 17-50 has image stabilization. Now, first off, it doesn't really work with the G85's dual IS compatibility with like their native lenses, but you put this on the GH4, turn on the lens stabilization, and it actually takes a lot of the little micro jitters out of the 70mm shots. Now I will say, compared to the G85's in-body image stabilization, this lens can't even touch that, but having that extra little bit of stabilization has been kind of nice. And the stabilization was actually one of the reasons I went with this lens over the 18-35 cost notwithstanding. Now there is one flaw that I personally don't care about at all, and that's going to be the autofocus performance of this lens, especially if you're going to be adapting with it. I wouldn't even consider autofocus if you're putting an adapter on really anything. But this lens, from what I'm reading in like the comments for people just putting it straight onto like a Canon T7i or T5i or whatever, they are noticing fairly significant autofocus issues where it's just not working out very well. But definitely, if you're going to be using autofocus with this lens, I'm sure it's worked out for a lot of people, but I would just look into those reviews on Amazon or B&H just to get a feel for what you're getting yourself into. Myself, I shoot 95% of everything manual focus, so it's not really a big issue. And speaking of manual focus on this lens, it's actually really nice. It can go through its entire focus range, whatever you call it, in about 1/8 of a turn, so you can pull focus really quickly. It's not necessarily as smooth as my focus by wire 25 1.7. You can definitely get some of those decent micro adjustments. It's definitely not as bad as like my Yongnuo 50 1.8. That is sloppy and plastic, but this is right there in the middle. Good quality, just not extremely smooth. So what do you think? Would you personally buy this lens? Is there a better option out there for the price that I'm missing? Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, I'll be sharing some sample footage with this lens very soon, so make sure to watch out for that. And as always, I hope this was helpful in some way, and I'll see you all next week.